बदलाव जो है वो हमेशा बहुत ही आसान नहीं होता। सरकार में काम कैसा होता है इसको समझने में बहुत समय लग जाता है। पीपल से दैट रूल्स डोंट परमिट दिस, रूल्स डोंट परमिट दैट, तो दे मेक रूल्स द एक्सक्यूज टू नॉट चेंज एनीथिंग। तो ये एक बहुत बड़ी चैलेंज है।
Namaskar and a very warm welcome to Jagran Dialogues. I am Smriti Rastogi. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Shashi Shekhar Vempati, former CEO of Prasar Bharti with us. Mr. Shashi Shekhar Vempati has headed Prasar Bharti for 5 years. Sir, a very warm welcome to Jagran.
Thank you and very happy to join the Jagran Dialogues.
And sir, this is one of the inaugural episodes of Jagran Dialogues, so we are all the more excited to have you on.
That makes it very special, so thank you for having me today.
Sir, we want to understand that how would you decode what Prasar Bharti is, its functioning and its responsibilities?
So Prasar Bharti is a statutory autonomous body, एक स्वायत्त संस्था है। इसे पार्लियामेंट संसद ने 1990s में इसका बिल पास हुआ था। फिर 7 साल बाद 97 में this came into existence. तो this year 2022 is actually the silver jubilee year, 25 years of Prasar Bharti. इससे पहले दूरदर्शन और ऑल इंडिया रेडियो वेयर गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट्स, जो सरकार जो मंत्रालय है इंफॉर्मेशन एंड ब्रॉडकास्टिंग, सूचना और प्रसारण, तो उसके तहत डिपार्टमेंट्स थे। इसके क्रिएट होने के बाद दे बिकम पार्ट ऑफ प्रसार भारती एज ऑटोनमस पब्लिक ब्रॉडकास्टिंग आर्म्स ऑफ प्रसार भारती फॉर टीवी एंड रेडियो। सो दैट इज द हिस्ट्री ऑफ प्रसार भारती।
सर, आपका बहुत इलस्ट्रियस करियर रहा 5 साल का प्रसार भारती के साथ। ऐसे बहुत सी चीज़ें, ऐसे बहुत से रिफॉर्म्स आप लेकर के आए जिसके लिए हमेशा थैंकफुल रहेगी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आपके लिए। ऐसे कौन से मेजर हाइलाइट्स रहे हैं आपके करियर के विद प्रसार भारती जो आप हमसे साझा करना चाहेंगे?
देखिए, मैं पहली बार जब प्रसार भारती आया था वो 2016 में था, जब मैं एक पार्ट टाइम बोर्ड मेंबर के तहत आया था। उसके बाद 1 साल बाद फिर 2017 में आई बिकेम द CEO ऑफ प्रसार भारती। तो मैंने नोटिस की थी, क्योंकि मैं तो आया था टेक्नोलॉजी और डिजिटल दुनिया से। 12 साल में इन्फोसिस में था, बाहर देश के बाहर भी था, फिर उसके बाद डिजिटल स्टार्टअप में था। तो मेरा बैकग्राउंड वाज ऑल टेक्नोलॉजी एंड डिजिटल, और यहाँ आकर देखा कि जो चीज़ें हम किसी भी मॉडर्न कॉरपोरेट के साथ एसोसिएट करते हैं वो बिल्कुल ही मिसिंग थे। ना कोई IT सिस्टम था, ना कोई डिजिटल का अडॉप्शन था, पुराने जो तौर तरीके थे वही चल रहे थे। तो जो सबसे बड़ा हाईलाइट मैं मानता हूँ कि इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, इस संस्था जिसने देश को इतना सारा दिया है, ऑल इंडिया रेडियो तो आज़ादी से पहले ही चल रहा था, दूरदर्शन भी जो हमारे जितने भी फॉर्मेटिव ईयर्स हैं वो दैट वाज कंट्रीब्यूटेड एंड शेप्ड बाय दूरदर्शन। तो ये जो 2 संस्थाएं अभी भी 20-30 साल पुराने आदतों से चल रहे थे। तो the major sudhar was to bring them to the 21st century, make them 21st century media organization.
डिजिटलाइजेशन की आप बात कर रहे हैं और एक ऑर्थोडॉक्स अप्रोच की बात करें कि जो प्रसार भारती में हमेशा से रही, तो ये 5 साल बहुत कारगर रहे। वो पुरानी जो ढर्रे पे चल रही थी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, उससे निकल करके नई तरीके, नए सोच, नए विकास को लेकर के आगे बढ़ने में क्या कुछ चैलेंजेस आपको फेस करने पड़े इन 5 सालों में ये नयापन लाने के लिए?
देखिए, कोई भी संस्था जो बहुत डेकेड से चल रहा है, बहुत दशकों से चल रहा है, तो उसमें एक तरह का कल्चर बन जाता है, एक तरह की संस्कृति बनती है कि किस तरह से काम होता है, लोग किस तरह से एक दूसरे के साथ कोलैबोरेट करते हैं, किस तरह से डिसीजन मेकिंग होता है। तो मैंने ये ऑब्जर्व किया था कि बहुत दूरदर्शन और ऑल इंडिया रेडियो में कि इंफॉर्मेशन शेयरिंग बहुत ही कम था। लोग अपने ही साइलोस में ऑपरेट कर रहे थे, सब कुछ कागज़ पे होता था, पेपर बेस्ड होता था। तो बहुत ही फंडामेंटल चेंज दैट वी हैड टू ब्रिंग कि हम किस तरह से फंक्शनिंग को ट्रांसपेरेंट बनाएं, किस तरह से हम साइलोस को तोड़ें, जो इंटरनल डिविजन्स थे उनको तोड़ें, और कन्वर्जेंस जो दुनिया भर में टीवी, रेडियो, डिजिटल का जो कन्वर्जेंस हो रहा है उसको हम कैसे ले आए। सो दैट वाज द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज। द सेकेंड बिगेस्ट चैलेंज इज ऑफ कोर्स रेजिस्टेंस टू चेंज, क्योंकि बदलाव जो है वो हमेशा बहुत ही आसान नहीं होता। तो लोगों को एक तरह का कंफर्ट जोन होता है जिसमें वो ऑपरेट करते हैं, तो उसमें से बाहर निकल कर कैसे ये IT टूल्स को अडॉप्ट करें, E-ऑफिस हो या बेसिक चीज़ें जैसे व्हाट्सएप हो। हम बिल्कुल ऑलमोस्ट वी मस्ट हैव क्रिएटेड अराउंड 80 व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स, जिससे हम पूरा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को भी ऑपरेट थ्रू। And this is so that decision making is real time, information is shared on a real time basis. Now what has happened कि हम सोशल मीडिया को 24 घंटे मॉनिटर कर रहे थे, कहीं भी कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो तुरंत हमें पता लगता था, और फिर व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स के द्वारा इमीडिएटली यू आर एबल टू टेक सम एक्शन।
पेपरलेस जो आपने बनाया है इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को, रेड टेपिज्म भी जैसा कि है वो बहुत खत्म हुआ, इसको ओवरकम कर लिया गया है। क्या विचार, मतलब हर्डल्स क्या क्या थे ऐसे में, क्योंकि ये जो आपने जैसे बोला कि जो चेंज होता है, जो बदलाव होता है, इतना आसान नहीं है। तो आप जिस बैकग्राउंड से आते हैं, नॉन ब्यूरोक्रेटिक बैकग्राउंड से आकर के ब्यूरोक्रेसी में सेटल होना, चीज़ों को समझना, ऐसे क्या हर्डल्स थे?
पहली चीज़ तो व्हाट यू पॉइंटेड आउट, क्योंकि मैं आया था प्राइवेट सेक्टर से, तो सरकार में काम कैसा होता है इसको समझने में बहुत समय लग जाता है। दूसरी चीज़, सरकार में जो भी होता है वो नियमों के तहत होता है। आरटीआई हो, विजिलेंस के रिलेटेड जो रूल्स हो, प्रोक्योरमेंट के रिलेटेड जो जीएफआर जनरल फाइनेंशियल रूल्स होते हैं, तो यू हैव टू ऑपरेट विद इन द एम्बिट ऑफ दीज रूल्स एंड तो इनको समझना और इनको क्रिएटिवली कैसे वी टेक एडवांटेज ऑफ देम, सो दैट जो हमारे गोल्स हैं, जो चेंज है, जो विजन है, जिसके तहत द एंटायर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वाज वर्किंग, हाउ टू अचीव देम। Because often what is happening is people say that, rules don't permit this, rules don't permit that. So they make rules the excuse to not change anything and to, propagate or persist status quo. So our whole objective was how do we take advantage of provisions within these rules so that you're compliant with the norms. At the same time, you bring the change that is necessary so that you're not, persisting with status quo just because the rule says X or rule says Y. तो ये एक बहुत बड़ी चैलेंज थी।
लेगेसी को लेकर के डिस्प्यूट्स थे, जो ऐसे प्रोग्राम्स थे जो बहुत डिस्प्यूटेड थे, उनको रिजॉल्व करने में एक अहम भूमिका निभाई आपके टेन्योर में। क्यों ऐसा था कि इतने सालों तक कोई चीज़, मतलब पिछले 25, 30, 40 सालों से कोई चीज़ खिंचती चली आई, और ऐसा क्या नया हुआ आपके टेन्योर में कि दैट यू आर एबल टू एड्रेस दोज?
तो इसमें लेट मी गिव अ बिट ऑफ अ हिस्ट्री एंड अ हिस्टोरिकल पर्सपेक्टिव। दूरदर्शन के इतने सारे सीरियल्स थे जो हम व्हेन वी वर ग्रोइंग अप, दे वर पार्ट ऑफ आवर ग्रोइंग अप एक्सपीरियंस। बुनियाद हो, हम लोगों को रामायण, महाभारत वगैरह। एंड वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट स्ट्रक मी जब व्हेन आई फर्स्ट बिकेम अ पार्ट टाइम बोर्ड मेंबर वाज दैट मेनी ऑफ दीज डिस्प्यूट्स वर नॉट सेटल्ड, कि इनके जो हिसाब किताब थे वो सेटल ही नहीं हुए थे। तो जो सीरियल्स को जो जब हम बच्चे थे स्कूल में वो देखते थे, उनके अब जाके वो उनके अकाउंट सेटल हो रहे हैं। सो दैट वाज अ वेरी ऑड थिंग। एंड देन व्हाट आई रियलाइज्ड इज दैट यहाँ एक तरह का कल्चर ये बन गया था कि रूल्स बदले ओवर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम। रूल्स के साथ जो भी प्रोक्योरमेंट हुआ था कंटेंट का, उसको कैसे सेटल करना है, इस पर कोई ओनरशिप ही नहीं था। Nobody was taking the ownership, and all these matters have landed up in various arbitrations and courts. And as people retired, new people came. The culture in the government is you pass the buck to the next guy. Why should you, stick your neck out and do anything? So here I would want to compliment the board, because the Prasar Bharti board played a very crucial role. जो I don't know UPA के समय पे क्या हुआ था 10 साल, क्योंकि this could have been easily have been sorted out during those 10 years of the UPA era. But it required the Narendra Modi-led government, after it took office in 2014, the board saw a lot of changes. You had professionals who were brought into the board. You had Chairman Dr. Surya Prakash, then I came in, Rajiv Singh as member finance. Then you had people from the industry, people like Sunil Alag, Ashok Tandon, who was a very senior figure in the Vajpayee government. So a lot of progressive, broad-minded people came into the board. And the board then took the initiative that disputes have to be settled. During lockdown, we were able to bring Ramayana.
That was indeed very commendable. और मुझे लगता है कि ऐसी कड़ी थी कि पूरा नेशन एक साथ बैठ करके रामायण, मुझे लगता है जो मिलेनियल जनरेशन है उसने भी एक,
तो उसके पीछे की जो कहानी है वो ये है कि रामानंद सागर जी के भी डिस्प्यूट्स वर नॉट सेटल्ड। अच्छा। तो फाइनली थैंक्स टू रामायण एंड लॉकडाउन द बोर्ड वाज एबल टू सेटल दैट। सिमिलरली सेवरल अदर आइकॉनिक प्रोड्यूसर्स ऑफ द इंडस्ट्री we have been able to solve their long standing problems. So the key difference is that the government, especially with Prime Minister Modi's belief in ease of doing business, so that ease of doing business का जो philosophy है, board ने उसको वेरियस पॉलिसीज, वेरियस स्कीम्स के तहत इम्प्लीमेंट किया ड्यूरिंग दिस 5-6 ईयर।
प्रसार भारती अंडर यूपीए को समझना चाहें, प्रसार भारती अंडर एनडीए को समझना चाहें, तो ये एक बहुत, अपार्ट फ्रॉम डिजिटलाइजेशन, अपार्ट फ्रॉम मेकिंग इट पेपरलेस, अपार्ट फ्रॉम ब्रिंगिंग इन न्यू रिफॉर्म्स, एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि लेगेसी जो डिस्प्यूट है उसको रिजॉल्व करने में बहुत अहम भूमिका निभाए।
The other big initiative which I would attribute to these 8 years of the Modi era, which Prasar Bharati, the changes that it saw, is DD Free Dish. DD Free Dish was conceptualized by the earlier NDA government during the Atal Bihari Vajpayee era. It was launched just when the UPA government took office. When I joined Prasar Bharati, the Free Dish base was about maybe 2 crores. Its revenues were about 270 crores. What has dramatically changed in the last 5-6 years and over the entire 8-year period is that the Free Dish base has now grown beyond 4.5 crore households. My estimate is that it's probably even higher than 5 crore households, because I don't think the measurement universe is accurately reflecting the total base of DD Free Dish. DD Free Dish, number of channels has increased. Its revenues have crossed 700 crores, almost touching 750 crores, which is a huge cushion to the limited, constrained finances of Prasar Bharati. And now with the government thinking of adding 200 educational channels, I think the sky is the limit for growth of DD Free Dish.
कोविड-19 के दौरान ऐसा भी हुआ था कि इंटरनेशनली जो दूरदर्शन के कंट्रीब्यूशन को रिकग्नाइज किया गया था, और रॉयटर्स ने बोला था कि जो ऑथेंटिक न्यूज़ दूरदर्शन दिखा रहा है दैट कैन बी कम्प्लीटली ट्रस्टेड व्हेन देयर वाज सो मच ऑफ मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन एंड फेक न्यूज़ अराउंड। तो दूरदर्शन का एक बहुत अहम किरदार तो है ही है। ऐसे में जो मीडिया रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क की अगर हम बात करें, कितनी ज़रूरत होती है कि इस तरीके के जो मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन है या गलत खबरें हैं वो ना फैलें?
बिल्कुल। सो द इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग, जो रॉयटर्स का जो इंस्टीट्यूट का जो स्टडी है, पिछले साल भी आया था, तो एवरीवन एट्रीब्यूटेड कि हाँ कोविड के समय बहुत मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन चल रहा था, फेक न्यूज़ चल रहा था, इसलिए पीपल थॉट दूरदर्शन एंड ऑल इंडिया रेडियो वर ट्रस्टवर्दी। उनका दूसरा रिपोर्ट भी आ गया इस साल का। There is no change. I mean, DD and AR continue to be the most trusted of media outlets. So I don't think it is limited to the fake news problem. It is a bigger phenomenon that the state broadcasters continue to enjoy a very high degree of trust. That if All India Radio says something, then people take it as authentic and कि such है. And so that puts enormous responsibility on the public broadcaster, because you can't get it wrong. Right? You have to get it right every single time.
जो कवरेज है दूरदर्शन जो कर रहा है अभी कंपेयर टू द प्रीवियस रेजीम्स, तो उस कवरेज में आपने कितना अंतर देखा है? अगर मैं पर्टिकुलरली बात करूं इलेक्शंस को लेकर के, इलेक्शन की खबरों को लेकर के, कितना डिफरेंस आया है और क्या कुछ नया किया गया है?
Big changes that you saw was high definition in live coverages. The scale and complexity of live coverages has increased. Earlier you used to do 10 camera, 20 camera, now we do 40, 50. In the case of for example the Trump visit to Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, more than 100 cameras were used, right? So the complexity and scale of live coverages has increased. Frequency of live coverages, now you do live coverages practically every week. So that level of sophistication, logistics, management, and ensuring that the quality of these coverages, especially when people were very highly were praising the coverage of the Ayodhya Bhumi Pujan, जो वाराणसी में, जो काशी में जो कॉरिडोर का इनॉग्रेशन हुआ था, वो the inauguration of the longest bridge in Assam over the Brahmaputra, the longest tunnel. So these are all very challenging coverages. And similarly, the presidential fleet review, right, which happens on the high seas. And then, of course, the Republic Day this year, where for the first time you had a perspective from the fighter jets.
आपने जितने भी आर्काइव्स है दूरदर्शन के सबको ऑनलाइन कर दिया है, which has become very more accessible for everyone. Viewers can definitely access it anytime, anywhere. ये विचार, ये सोच के पीछे क्या आपका मन था?
तो ये एक बहुत ही स्टनिंग चीज़ थी, because I am a history buff and I have all these memories of what we saw, what we heard when we were growing up. So when I first came into Prasar Bharati, I was very curious कि archives में क्या है, what do we have in the archives, and what was stunning to me is that एक mindset था कि archives are like family silver. इसको आपको बंद करके कहीं सिक्योर रखना है, इसको किसी को दिखाना नहीं है, कुछ करना नहीं है इसके साथ. So ये बहुत ही क्यूरियस सा कल्चर था, तो इसको बदलना था. So digitization was happening, but the content was just sitting in vaults. It was not being publicized, and so because people were afraid that it will lose its value. So I told them that unless the public has a way of accessing this content, you will not realize that value. So one of the things that we started doing was that we will digitize the content, but we will also make it publicly available. So we started putting archival content on YouTube, and that made a big difference. And if you see some of the iconic recordings, the speeches by various prime ministers from Red Fort, Constituent Assembly debates, interviews with icons like Dilip Kumar, Raj Kapoor, Shakuntala Devi live in the studio of Doordarshan, right? The radio autobiography of J.R.D. Tata. So a lot of iconic content. So now that is publicly accessible, people are aware. Until now, people were not even aware. And to me, as both a buff of history and the importance of democracy in India, the footages of emergency period, which nobody has ever seen, right? Because we only have a memory, or we've read, or we've heard about the emergency. Now you can actually see what happened, right? So we have recordings from that era as well.
सर, एक जगह पे मैंने पढ़ा था कि आपने बोला था कि देयर इज अ नीड टू बिल्ड अ लोकल इकोसिस्टम फॉर टेक्नोलॉजी वेंडर्स टू सप्लाई द मीडिया एंड एंटरटेनमेंट इंडस्ट्री विद ऑल काइंड ऑफ इक्विपमेंट्स. इस पहलू को लेकर के क्या कुछ हो रहा है?
तो ये एक और बहुत ही बिजार था कि हम इतने 1000 करोड़ खर्च कर रहे थे, and not just during this government, right? Even the previous governments, and a lot of infrastructure was procured. It's all going to vendors, who are outside India. And what is worse is ये जो technology that we were procuring, इसके जो standards जिसके basis पे ये technology procure हो रहा था, उनके पूरे intellectual rights were with foreign broadcasters and foreign media companies. So the royalties would accrue to them. So it's very bizarre that we are the biggest, one of the biggest broadcasting networks in the world. We spend so much in terms of investment in infrastructure and technology, much more than the private sector, because we have a bigger, responsibility. But the beneficiaries of this are foreign vendors and, foreign broadcasters and other entities who own the rights and the royalties. So it was felt that, we need to change this. We need to, work on creating a domestic ecosystem. So we try to engage more with the startups in India, with the IITs, try to do, more indigenous, technology projects. So it's a beginning. I won't say we've solved it.
प्रसार भारती फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2021-22 की बात करें तो रेवेन्यू ग्रोथ 13% थी कमर्शियल ऑपरेशंस की. कैसे आप अंडर द एनडीए गवर्नमेंट या पिछले 5 सालों की मैं बात करूं इन पर्टिकुलर, तो इस रेवेन्यू ग्रोथ को कैसे देखते हैं और कैसे इवॉल्व हुआ है ये रेवेन्यू ग्रोथ?
देखिए, दिस रेवेन्यू ग्रोथ हैज़ 3 एस्पेक्ट्स टू इट. One is the growth in non-traditional revenue streams, which is DD Free Dish, DTH auction से जो revenue आता है, जो digital platform से जो revenue आता है, जो asset monetization जो हमारे towers हैं, which we rent out to private FM operators, we rent them out to cellular operators, उस monetization से जो revenue आता है. So all these have contributed to the non-traditional sources of revenue. Now that has grown to almost 800 crores, which is a huge change from what it was, 5-6 years back, right? Second is the reduction in the dependence on government as a source of revenue, because government is also a big spender of, advertising and sponsorship of content on DD and AR historically. Now that has dramatically come down. So our dependence on government has come down. Our non-traditional revenue sources have increased. Then we also saw that radio had a bounce back after COVID-19. So radio revenues also recovered. The biggest challenge though is on the TV commercial revenue side. And that challenge is largely because the landscape is so competitive. You have 900 TV channels all competing for that same share of the pie. And during the lockdown, thankful to Ramayana, Mahabharat, the Doordarshan's ratings were very high. In fact, the ad rates on Doordarshan had almost crossed 1 lakh plus. But to sustain that required new content. So one of the areas that we worked on was to revamp the content policies. So now you will see the benefits of that. I'm told that new content will be onboarded soon. So all the good work that was done for the last year and a half will now pave the way for good content to come in.
टीवी न्यूज़ रेटिंग्स की अगर बात करें तो यू वर अपॉइंटेड बाय द गवर्नमेंट टू लुक एट इट व्हेन द एलिगेशंस अबाउट द टीआरपी रिगिंग एंड एवरीथिंग दे वर आउट इन 2020. क्या ऑब्जर्वेशंस रही आपकी उस स्टडी करने के बाद?
देखिए, द टीआरपी कमिटी वाज फॉर्म्ड एट अ वेरी क्रिटिकल पीरियड फॉर द इंडस्ट्री. जब रेटिंग्स को लेके जो सवाल थे, they went beyond the acceptable norms. They resulted in all kinds of cases and interventions, and पूरे इंडस्ट्री में एक तरह का क्राइसिस ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस आ गया था. So we looked at all aspects of the ratings framework. कि what is the licensing framework under which ratings are being generated? What is the methodology? What is the process? How are the organizations being governed and so on? And what we found was that corporate governance को लेकर बहुत सारे gaps थे. Conflicts of interest were not being adequately safeguarded against. So the committee's recommendations largely focused on how do we bring in corporate governance reforms within the ratings environment. So that is one aspect. Second was जो methodology है उसको how can we make it more contemporary. Because historically TV ratings were sample based. Now technology is available where you can broad base it, you can do return path data, you can do other methods. So we also looked at what technology wise changes are required. How do we bring in more innovation into the ratings environment? But most importantly of all this, I mean, you can bring the best technology, you can put in all the safeguards, but it is the industry, because the ratings environment is the product of the various stakeholders in the industry coming together. So they have to abide by the rules. They have to say that, these are the rules by which audience measurement will happen, and we all abide by that. We will play fair, right? That is very important, because without that, even the best algorithms, the best technology will not solve this problem.
You were the first non-bureaucratic person to be hired for the topmost position at प्रसार भारती. आपकी जर्नी IIT बॉम्बे से लेकर के प्रसार भारती के CEO तक आप कैसे डिस्क्राइब करेंगे?
It's a very interesting question. So when I became a part-time board member in 2016, at that time Prasar Bharti was still operating from PTI building, and it took me back 20 years, because my first job after IIT Bombay, chemical engineering, was with Engineers India Limited. And Engineers India in those days in Delhi had 3 offices. Main was in Bikaji Kama Place, the R&D center was in Gurgaon. The process department was in PTI building. Different floor. So here I was after 20 years, revisiting, it's like life took a full circle. So I went from, chemical engineering to, I drifted to IT at Infosys. And that was also a very interesting thing, because I was here in Delhi. This was 95, 96, when internet had just about, started to take roots in India. So I was doing a lot of interesting stuff on the internet at EIL, and then I realized that I'm going to be a bad chemical engineer, so I decided to move to software. And
what made you think like that?
Because I was spending so much time on software and IT and Infosys, and looked like a better option, because as a chemical engineer I needed to specialize in that direction, and I was not doing that. I was doing something else. Right, so it was the first inflection point from a career standpoint, and I moved to Infosys in Bangalore. I was at Infosys for almost 16 years, and 11 of which in the US. And around 2012, I came back to India, and 2013 I quit Infosys. We had created a digital startup called Neeti Digital, which operated one of India's first news portals from a center-right political ideology standpoint, called Neeti Central, which Kanchan Gupta, veteran editor, was heading. And I was running this digital campaign platform called India 272, which was again for the first time in a political campaign ahead of the Lok Sabha elections. You were using a digital platform to engage volunteers, to engage people from various walks of life, students, professionals, doctors, so that they all get connected with the Modi campaign for the 2014 elections. So that was another interesting experiment.
एक इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ जो मेरे मन में आ रही है, द डे योर टेन्योर गॉट ओवर विद प्रसार भारती, आपने एक ट्वीट किया था। ट्वीट करके आपने माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी को आपने टैग करके उनका धन्यवाद दिया था। तो ये एक ऐसी चीज़ है जो हर किसी के मन में एक सवाल खड़ा कर रही है कि क्या वजह थी कि आपने डायरेक्टली प्रधानमंत्री जी को धन्यवाद किया। इसके पीछे लोग डिकोड करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
देखिए, आई थिंक the Prime Minister, I need to, I thanked him and I complimented him because he brought in this cultural change of laterals, coming into government. And otherwise, people from the private sector, people from the industry, it's very hard for any of us to conceive, to get involved either in politics or, to come and contribute in public office. So this is, I think singularly his initiative. And so I was very thankful for that. Also, it is also his broad-mindedness and foresight that he's a great believer in technology. And if you look at his, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, when I first met him in 2011, and from that time I have observed that, he's not afraid of experimenting with technology. I recall in 2012, he was the first politician in India to do a Google Hangout. And that day, servers of Google YouTube had crashed in India, right? So, and then he's experimented with 3D rallies. Then, for Mission 272, creating this India 272 platform, digital volunteering, which is what has now transformed into, MyGov, for example, right? So he's a great believer in technology. And I would think that was one of the primary reasons why at that time, between the chairman, then Dr. Surya Prakash, then INB Minister Venkaiah Naidu ji, and the PM, I think there was a broad thought process that Prasar Bharati had to be, needed technology, needed a professional to come in. And that's how things happened.
कोई भी जो टेन्योर होता है सर, अगर इतना इलस्ट्रियस करियर होता है, इतने कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस होते हैं, इतनी ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग होती है, तो कोई भी जो टेन्योर होता है वो विदाउट कंट्रोवर्सी होता नहीं है. दिस रिमाइंड्स मी ऑफ पीटीआई कंट्रोवर्सी. उसके बारे में आप थोड़ा सा हमें बताइए.
इट्स अ वेरी अगेन an oddity. In fact, you find many such oddities in Prasar Bharati which have a decadal history. So Prasar Bharati's contracts with PTI and UNI had ended around 2005-2006. Since 2006, the services of PTI and UNI were being availed without a contract because there was a fundamental difference of philosophy or whatever you say between the Prasar Bharati board on how these services should be priced and the perception of the news agencies on how these. There's a difference of opinion and it had to be resolved and so on. But then 2006, you fast forward to 2016-17, 10 years. Right. You are still operating in an ad hoc basis. Where does this ever happen, right? And in 2016, when I joined the board, this was a hot subject of debate because we were paying around 9 crores of rent to PTI for the building, and we were paying another 9 crores of subscription. So total of 18 crores annually to PTI, which the board felt was, completely unjustified. And similarly for UNI, because they were not able to, make a connection between the cost of these services and the value that we were deriving from these services. So the board felt that, PTI and UNI should revisit their pricing, and they were just adamant. For 10 years, more than 10 years, they just did not, come up with an alternative pricing model. They were very stubborn. So then the board unilaterally decided that, we will reduce their annual subscriptions till this matter is resolved. So that decision was taken by the board then when I was a part-time member.
In 2016-17.
Yeah. And then the issue still did not get resolved. 3 years later, 2019, we said, now we have to draw a line somewhere. We have to, take a final call on this. Because especially after some of those incidents, where we felt that, these news agencies which were being subsidized historically by the public broadcaster were not in the interest of the country. And then, finally the board took a decision that we are going to terminate these services.
And that is how this, you were there in the limelight. Okay, so since we are nearing the wrapping up of the show, so one important question: what is the roadmap ahead from here for Prasar Bharati?
The roadmap for Prasar Bharati emerges from the many board decisions. Also, the visions of the various ministers who we had the opportunity to work with over these 5-6 years, be it Venkaiah ji, be it Smriti ji, Colonel Rathod, Prakash Javadekar ji, and of course Anurag ji most recently. All of them were very clear that Prasar Bharati, Doordarshan and All India Radio need to improve on the content. The content needs to match up with the best of the state of the art in the industry, the private media houses. And digital OTT is a big priority. Digitalization is a big priority. So the roadmap for the future emerges from all of this, but it also happens within the context of the changing manpower situation. So we had Ernst & Young had done a manpower audit. They made several recommendations: how to bring in professional talent, how to phase out obsolete technologies like old analog terrestrial transmitters, how to bring in IT systems in various places, how to do outsourcing and so on. So the future roadmap will be a combination of these two goals.
Sir, अगला पड़ाव कहाँ पे आपका रहेगा और हम कौन सी ऐसी बड़ी पोजीशन आपको हेड करते हुए देखेंगे in the near future?
That's for the future. I can't really comment on that, but I think I did my best under the circumstances, under the challenges that were there, and I always felt that Doordarshan and All India Radio were so important when we were growing up in our formative years, be it watching any of these serials, Star Trek, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, Sanskrit news on radio, listening to cricket commentary on radio. So all of these played a role in shaping and making who we are. So I always felt that this was an opportunity to give back to those institutions, and I think I was able to do that. So that itself is a great satisfaction.
बिल्कुल सर, और आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई. Congratulations the way you have contributed to the functioning of Prasar Bharati. It is indeed commendable, sir, and wonderful having you there on our show Jagran Dialogue.
Thank you, and wishing you all the very best for this new series of Jagran Dialogues, and I'm sure it will make its impact in the digital world. So best wishes, and thank you once again for having me.
Thank you so much, sir. And with that, it's a wrap on this particular edition of Jagran Dialogues. हम फिर हाजिर होंगे with another special guest soon. Till then, stay tuned and keep watching Jagran New Media.